Warm welcome to today's European Sustainable Energy Day event, No Infrastructure Without People, Public Engagement for European Energy Infrastructure. My name is Diana Süßer. I'm a senior expert at the Institute for European Energy and Climate Policy, short IEECP. And the IEECP is organizing this event together with the User-Centered Energy Systems, TCP, by the International Energy Agency, under which we are currently leading a task called Public Engagement for Energy Infrastructure. A fully packed hour is basically ahead of us, and you will hear new insights from a multi-country survey that we have been conducting on how citizens want to engage in specifically emerging energy infrastructures. And afterwards, we will have 4 great experts today with us to discuss more about key aspects of meaningful engagement of the public in energy infrastructures. Let's take us also a moment to celebrate the launch of our community of practice, Engage for Energy. Basically, it is meant to be a space for ongoing exchanges and collaborations on meaningful public engagement for energy infrastructure across Europe. We are very excited about the launch, and we welcome you to the community. So you can just basically follow the link or Google it, and you will find us. A little bit on the background of the event, No Infrastructure Without People, ? Last week, we had a European Sustainable Energy Week, and it became very clear again that energy infrastructures are very critical for a clean, secure, and competitive Europe. But we also know that the kind of big policy aims and different development strategies do not automatically translate in public support, or neither in the feeling of the people to be actually part of this energy transition journey. There's also a quite well-known difference between the general technology acceptance and the local acceptability of concrete energy infrastructure projects. And for this reason, actually, public perceptions, trust, but also engagement in concrete energy infrastructure projects are very relevant. But do people actually want to engage in those energy infrastructures? And if so, how? This was actually the main question that we wanted to explore within the current task, public engagement for energy infrastructure, specifically the phase 2. So what we did was to conduct an online survey on public engagement in local infrastructure projects involving 3 different technologies: green hydrogen, carbon capture, storage and utilization, and advanced nuclear energy technologies. And we conducted the survey across the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, Sweden, and Austria. The specific focus was really on local infrastructure projects, or projects that are really close to the people and where they live. And when it comes to the term engagement, we really understood it kind of from a broader perspective, from being informed over consulting people to the highest level of involving citizens in the actual decision-making about concrete energy infrastructure projects. And overall, we had over 2,400 respondents across the 4 countries. But before we share you now some exciting results from the survey, we got a little live poll for you to hear maybe from you about what you think about the different perspectives that people across Europe may have on such emerging energy infrastructures. Mary? So the first question is, which country has the most knowledge around advanced nuclear? You can choose one of the 4 countries where we conducted the survey, either UK, Austria, Sweden, or the Netherlands. So please poll now. Then I think you can directly move on to the next question. The second question is, which country has the most knowledge on carbon capture, utilization, and storage? Please choose again one of the 4 countries that you see listed. The third question asks, which country has the most knowledge on green hydrogen? So is it either the UK, Austria, Sweden, or the Netherlands? And then last but not least, which country do you think has the highest willingness to engage with the previous technologies? So where do you think that citizens are most willing actually to engage in whatever forms, like with those specific technologies? And I think we have the responses coming in. Once you have entered your responses, and let's go through them. Hopefully you can see the responses on my screen. If that's not the case, Mary, please let me know.
I can see.
So great. Which country has the most knowledge on advanced nuclear? And we see most of you thought it might be the UK, but actually it were no, actually the most people of you think it's Sweden. That's the highest I'm seeing now. Just running a bit before the UK, the Netherlands, and Austria. Oh, similar. You think most the Swedish have the most knowledge on carbon capture and utilization. That's interesting. If you look on hydrogen, most of you responded the Netherlands might have the most knowledge around the technology. Just before the UK and Austria. And last but not least, which country has the highest willingness to engage? And Sweden is again among the highest. This might mean we have the highest participation among the Swedish, and they maybe responded as for Sweden, or maybe that's different. Already an interesting perspective. Why maybe in Sweden most people might share the knowledge. Okay, great. So let's see if that's true, if Sweden is kind of leading in most of the familiarity with the technologies and maybe also in the willingness to engage. And I'm very glad to give the floor now to my colleague, Nives Della Valle, who's also a senior expert at IEECP.
Thanks a lot, Diana, and thanks for the responses that you gave to the poll. Let's come now to the responses, the actual responses that we got from the survey that we conducted in the 4 countries. And here is the question on how much people know about these 3 technologies. Here the scale was from 1 to 3, from I don't know anything about it, and the maximum was actually I'm very expert about it. And here you can see that actually there is some variation not only across technologies, but also across countries. For renewable hydrogen, let's say that we don't see much heterogeneity across countries. So there is somehow some homogeneity, but coming to advanced nuclear and CCUS, things differ. So for instance, for advanced nuclear, we see that some countries stand more out, such as the Netherlands, and for CCUS is the one where respondents know the least about. So these already tell us something about the knowledge about the technologies. But even though they know they are not expert about these technologies, perhaps they are open to engage with the projects about the development of these technologies close to their home. And we can see in the next slide, in the question where we, if we move now to the next slide, we can perhaps see the other question that was about the opening, whether they were open to engage. And here the question was really very open in itself. So basically the question was from a Likert scale from 1 to 5. And again, here we see that renewable hydrogen doesn't elicit that heterogeneity across countries. So overall, they are all open to engage with renewable hydrogen, but things differ when it comes to advanced nuclear and CCUS, carbon capture, utilization and storage. We can see, for instance, that UK is actually the country that was the most open to engage with all technologies, all the 3. And we can see instead that Austria was the one that was the least open to engage with technologies, especially advanced nuclear and also CCUS. So this tells us also something about the magnitude of their openness to engage. But what does it mean, being open to engage? So in the next slide, we can see actually the meaning of engagement, because we asked questions exactly on how they wanted to engage. Diana already said that we tried to focus on whether they wanted to be consulted, whether they wanted to receive all information about the project development, or whether they actually wanted to play an active role in the decision-making process of the project development. That means co-design together, collaborating together on the relevant decisions of the project. What we call, in simple terms, consultees, co-creators, and then we find also the disengaged, those that prefer actually not to be involved at all. And actually, we see that across all countries and across all the three technologies, you can see the orange bar that is the consultees, those that want to engage through this consultation information mode, play actually the majority. And so this is a bit in between being disengaged and being a co-creator in the decision-making process. So it's a nice result, because actually, despite not knowing a lot, despite having an average openness to engage, it means that citizens still want to be engaged, at least through a consultation mode. And then the preference follows with being co-creators. And the disengaged percentage likely is only the minority, but that differs across technologies, especially for advanced nuclear. The disengaged percentage was actually the highest. So this tells us something about it, and this was especially true for Austria. And CCUS instead was on the intermediate position. But we also wanted to give some policy recommendations to policymakers, and I don't want to spend a lot of time also to give space to the other speakers, but with the regression models, and we can move to the next slide, we try to identify some factors that can be used by policymakers as entry points in their engagement strategies before the project around these technologies are implemented. And here, if we focus on the renewable hydrogen, we can see that across countries, the factors that distinguish the co-creators with those that prefer to be disengaged are somehow shared in some regards, such as having previous knowledge or having positive feelings about the technologies makes people prefer to engage in this co-creative mode compared to being disengaged. But there are also some context-specific factors that countries need to take into account, such as having this attachment to the place, some meaning related to their identity, something that actually can play a negative role on the willingness to engage through this co-creative mode. And this was specifically the case for the Netherlands and Sweden. And just a teaser to the next slide, we can see instead the CCUS profile. So again, the comparison between the co-creators versus the disengaged. Again, we here see some shared factors, such as having previous knowledge about the technologies, having positive feelings. These are all positive factors that predict the preference to engage through this co-creative mode. But there are also some context-specific factors. And here we see, for instance, for Austria, having a higher energy justice concerns negatively predict the preference to co-create, to actually engage to this co-creative mode. Rather, people prefer to be disengaged. So this might also tell us something about the perception that citizens have around that technologies in a just energy system, in their vision of a just energy system. And to conclude, we conclude here with the advanced nuclear profile. And we can see again some shared factors that predict the willingness to engage to this co-creative mode, but there are also some context-specific factors. And here we see again for Austria that having an energy conservation attitude through individual behaviors actually negatively predict this preference to engage through a collaborative mode. And perhaps this also tells us something about how people prefer to save energy, and perhaps also this might be associated to their meaning of how this should be done. And so rather than doing that through the advanced nuclear infrastructure problem, they prefer to play more way to individual action instead. And with this, I conclude, and I'm happy to then discuss later with you.
Thank you so much, Nives, for sharing some of the survey results with us. Very exciting. We got one first question in, but please, reminder to everyone, please ask some questions if you have any. You can easily use the chat for that. It is around the terminology. Well, what terminology, Nives, did we use to introduce advanced nuclear to the respondents? It was said that most of the times in the Netherlands, everyone talks about small-scale nuclear plants. You can respond directly. Yes.
Yeah, so basically, Diana shared also in the previous slide, there was actually a definition of renewable hydrogen. So of course, it was not an extensive definition because the survey was made also of different survey items. But for each of the three technology, we gave a small definition. So for advanced nuclear, it was a small modular reactors. We also explain actually how energy is produced, and that also involves storage. There might be also some testing processes around these emerging technologies, and that was also the case for CCUS and again for hydrogen, that in this case we focused specifically on renewable hydrogen.
Thanks so much, Nives. Yeah, not so easy, right, to define like this kind of complex technologies. Also, that we had already in mind that maybe the previous knowledge might be not so high, regarding the technologies. I don't see any other questions. If no one from the speakers or discussants wants to come in, then I think we can always continue the discussion and come, of course, back to you, Nives, also later if there are some further questions. Now, I'm very happy to introduce you to our four great speakers that we have here with you today. The first one is Andrei Cheklatz, Director at the Energy Systems at Renewable Grid Initiative, short RTI. Then we have Jayza Dowdy she is a Senior Advisor at the Swedish Energy Agency. Then we have Mary Thomas. She is a researcher at the University of Exeter. And last but not least, Tanya Perko, a senior researcher at the SCK Ken Research Center. So warm welcome to the four of you. We will have a set of two rounds, basically, of small interventions from your side, and then also a round of discussions. But please, again, everyone in the event, you can ask your questions in the chat, and then we will directly come to the questions when the time comes. But first, I would like to give the floor to Andrei directly.
Yes, many thanks, Diana, for this introduction and also for the invitation to join this webinar. Very interesting results of the research that you conducted, and I'm looking forward also to dive deeper into the results once they will be published, better to understand the nuances and differences. But with my intervention today, I would like to share some insights from ongoing activities around the technology that is, let's say, more established, more advanced, that it's not emerging technology anymore, which are electricity grids, and very specifically some insights from the Pact for Engagement, which deals very specifically of engagement of stakeholders in development of this specific technology. And just a short word which organization I'm representing, because that's also the standing point why engagement is so important in the context of a technology. energy. So Renewables Grid Initiative is a quite unusual organization because it brings together representatives of the industry, so transmission system operators, as well as climate and environmental NGOs across Europe, with the idea to develop the infrastructure in a way that actually follows nature protection, but also put emphasis of the importance of participatory formats and engaging with stakeholders. And as mentioned, I would like to say about the activities around the Pact for Engagement and what is it actually? So Pact is an initiative of the European Commission that was launched in November 2023 as a part of the EU Grids Action Plan that set up specific requirements and activities and actions that are needed from the entire sector in order to progress with development of the electricity grid needed, or again, for the energy transition. And stakeholder engagement, meaningful stakeholder engagement, was included among those related to planning or technological development, which is already a very good sign, saying that there is appreciation and understanding also from the policy side how important engagement is. And the pact itself, it discusses activities around 5 different areas. It puts attention to the communication efforts for the needs for grids in the energy transition. It encourages to facilitate national and local level cooperation to speed up the permitting, so the implementation on the ground. It looks at the European level and the regional cooperation for development of PCIs, which are projects of common interest, so to connect Europe. It also strives to have or improve regulatory framework for engagement activities, and also emphasizes the importance of capacities and resources to make all of those engagement activities possible. So what did happen at the European level with since the pact itself was launched from summer 2024? There have been regular meetings of Pact for Engagement stakeholders, which include European Commission, the European Agency of Energy Regulators, also grid operators across different voltage levels, so transmission and distribution, as well as NGOs, researchers. So it's a very broad community that deals with the topic. And at the beginning, they work together to develop 10 guiding principles for early public engagement and sharing best practices. That it was a collaborative work by the entire stakeholder group. And in the course of since after the principles have been developed, together with the European Commission as well with the Agency for Cooperation of Energy Regulators, as RGI, we were thinking that what is missing or should be more explored to understand differences across Europe is this regulatory support for engagement activities, because in different countries there are different landscapes that allow for cost recognition of stakeholder activities. So we carried out a survey to understand those differences across different countries, which was then presented at the Energy Infrastructure Forum in 2025 with a clear mandate to build and develop a roadmap to produce a dedicated chapter investments plan that would allow for additional costs, for additional resources, or at least the recognition for better stakeholder engagement activities. In last month, this roadmap was launched after a year since the mandate was given again at the Infrastructure Forum in Copenhagen, which is also a conference organized by the European Commission dedicated to grids in Europe. It was very well received. It was also a collaborative work over the entire year from stakeholders involved in the sector, setting up rules, what should be included in those chapters, dedicated chapters to stakeholder activities that should accompany investment plans. So what are the, let's say, ingredients of this successful collaboration? First of all, I would say that there should be a sectoral agreement across different actors, including industry, including supply side, including policymakers, that there is a need, that there is an added value for stakeholder engagement, that meaningful participation is important, independently what is the scope. Secondly, such a progress would not be possible without political and regulatory commitment. So bringing also those actors on board to provide the progress, and enabling possibility and opportunities to exchange best practices can actually bring progress in different geographies. The next steps are more practical, is to deep dive and understand how such a template for public engagement plans for those dedicated chapters should look like, as well as understanding what roles and responsibilities should different actors play at the local level when it comes to the implementation, because there are differences across Europe. So I think that's it. I will finish here, and also please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andre. You can also leave this last slide with your conclusions here. So yeah, thanks a lot. Actually, Jesa is not here with us yet. Maybe she can join us at a later moment in time, but maybe then, yeah, before all the questions for you coming in, Andre, maybe one question. I mean, we see it's kind of a great process, right, where different stakeholders already come together kind of to shape this pact for engagement and to really develop kind of a roadmap to define ideally maybe also some regulatory insights on and some guidance, you know, how to engage the public. What do you think can we learn now, for example, from the grid infrastructure case? As you said, it's not new, right? You have already some kind of years of experience for kind of potentially emerging energy infrastructures.
Yes, thank you for this. And so there's one point, and I thought that I might have a backup slide, but it might not be there.
It's here. If you want to have this one, is it this one, Andre?
No.
No. Okay.
Yes. So okay, but I just wanted to have this slide also to maybe to show the audience. But what I wanted to say is that quite often, while thinking about the implementation of the infrastructure, quite often and engagement of the people, we tend to think that it's only about making decisions where the infrastructure should be located, when it should be sited, when it should be based. But actually, there are many different stages related to infrastructure development, planning, implementation, maintenance, operation, and then the commissioning. So something that we learn over the course of the work in the Pact for Engagement, but also with dealing with electricity grids, it's to make sure that people are engaged at those different stages, making aware how those different technologies are important and relevant for the energy transition, which potential decarbonization, the future we are going to follow, because this will determine how much of different technologies we will need. And then following different steps of the planning, different types of engagement can take place, whether those would be related to location, siting, and then, as mentioned, once the infrastructure is already all in place, it's still very relevant and important to keep people engaged when it comes to maintenance work, when it comes to the operation, when it comes to taking care of the nature and ecosystem around existing infrastructure. So I would say that this is the main lesson learned or to share with those emerging technologies. If some of the, let's say, infrastructures or assets are still being developed.
Thanks so much. Yeah, very interesting. That are kind of some basic principles, right, of engagement that can be maybe then also applied to other technologies. And then, of course, there might be some differences, you know, some specific conditions for each that might be, taken into consideration. Thank you so much, Andre, for sharing all the insights. And I would propose then, I don't see any urgent questions now in the chat, but there might become some questions in later on. But maybe then let's move directly on to Marion Thomas. I give the floor to you, please.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Push It project. And I'm presenting on behalf of myself and my colleagues. I think Madeleine's here as well today. So hi, Madeleine. We are based at the University of Exeter and Anglia Ruskin University, both of which are in the UK. So without further ado, so Push It stands for Piloting Underground Storage of Heat in Geothermal Reservoirs. It's a big EU project, and essentially it's looking at 3 ways of storing energy as heat underground, so in aquifers, boreholes and mines. And Push It has got a dedicated social engagement programme. So that's the programme that Madeleine and I and Ian and Mel and Patrick are working on. And that essentially has 2 main threads. The first is examining public perceptions. And for this, we've done a big survey across the 4 countries that are involved in the project and are hosting pilot sites, and also focus groups around each of those sites as well. And also we're developing engagement practice alongside the partners within the project as well. And one of those things that we've done as part of this developing engagement practice is create an engagement catalogue, which is what I'm talking about today. So the engagement catalogue has been co-created alongside partners within the project and also external engagement experts. I've just got my hard copy here, that's why I'm rustling around. And it's a free resource for anyone who wants to engage communities around underground thermal energy storage in particular, but it's also really relevant to other energies, especially underground energies in particular. But we hope it will be useful across the board. As I say, it's been a collaboration, so I do want to say thank you to everyone who's contributed. So this has, as I say, been the people within Push It who've had lots of on-the-ground experience of engaging the local communities with the pilot projects that they've been doing, but also externally as well. And lots of people who've been involved in other projects that we've been part of, because lots of those ideas have been featured in the engagement catalogue as well. So what does the engagement catalogue include? So it's about 60 pages long. It's freely available online. I'll put the links in the chat in a minute where you can access the catalogue. But just to briefly introduce you to what's in it, the first section is essentially an introduction to engagement. So this is tips and advice on public engagement, including best principles, things like timelines that might be useful, and aspects to think about when doing recruitment, ethics, etc. And then there's a whole section on various engagement formats. So these are things from town hall meetings to questionnaires to site visits, school visits, all sorts of things in there. And then my personal favourite bit is the whole section on engagement activities. So this is about 30 activities that can be used within those different engagement formats. So these range from in-depth activities that could be part of deliberative workshops, for example, to quick, we've got a 1-minute melon activity in there, through to participatory mapping, kitchen science activities that can be particularly useful for working with schools, and all sorts of activities in there. As I say, it's all freely available, but if you've got any questions at all, please do get in touch. I'll put my email address in the chat as well, and you can access it via the QR code. I hope I've done that within 5 minutes and didn't rush it too much, but thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marin, for sharing basically this engagement catalog. Very exciting. Looking now through the catalog and seeing, the different activities, when would you use, or how can we best basically decide when to use maybe what activity or engagement strategy? Maybe that's the kind of a critical, when I'm starting now, what should I maybe consider? And do you have any insights what might be the most effective formats kind of in a certain context? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I'm just putting the links in the chat now. So it's a really good question. Thank you. And it does totally depend on why you're doing the engagement. Do you want to provide communities with decision-making powers, for example? Do you want to raise awareness of a project? It totally depends on why you want to do it, what stage of the engagement it is, as to what activity and what format of engagement would be best. So that's kind of what we've got the engagement catalogue for. And it really depends on those things. And there's sort of tables in there that help you think about which might be best for which. But I would say it, what we found from our survey, for example, one of the things we found from our survey is there's a lot of interest out there in these technologies, and as long as engagement is done well, it can be very, very effective in increasing both understanding and support. But of course, again, it depends on what you're doing the engagement for as to what activity is most appropriate. But yeah, I mean, there's all sorts in there depending on who you're working with. Children's books, games, in-depth deliberative workshops, all sorts. Yeah.
Great, thanks so much, Mary. I think that's an important point, right? To first why you engage, and then maybe having a look also on what situation you are, like in terms of engagement process, and then to choose. So I think it's a very good source, for everyone. Thank
you
much for sharing this. I would propose that we move then further on. Of course, we can always come back and continue the discussion around the catalog if there are any questions. Please feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm happy to give the floor to Tanya and to bring us the perspective on another technology. Yeah, happy to hear from you. Tanya, can you hear us?
Good. Now we can hear each other, and I also see our slides. We will go immediately to the next technology, which is small modular nuclear reactors. And this is for our colleague who was asking how are we defining small modular nuclear reactors. Here below you can see small means a fraction of a size of traditional reactors, physically and energetically speaking. Modular means including factory assembled components elements which can be transported, and nuclear reactors. It means utilizing nuclear fission to generate heat and therefore produce energy. So European Union is quite enthusiastic about this type of the reactors, which I must stress, they are not yet operational in Europe, but they are coming. There are also a lot of support from the European leadership to develop this kind of reactors to in the light of the decarbonization, but also the sustainability of the energy production, independence, and so on. Next slide will tell us about how do we deal with the risks related to this kind of technology, because like any other technology, also small modular nuclear reactors, they involve risks that they must be really carefully assessed and managed. And also in this part, there is no infrastructure without people. Also the people's concerns, people's feelings, people's expectation about these risks, they need to be carefully taken into account. And luckily, we live in really democratic society where we have this, according to European directive, obliged environmental impact assessment process through which every big energy building or energy installation needs to go through. So in this environmental impact assessment, we need to ensure that environmental, societal, and economic factors are really considered in decision making for sustainable development, let's say. And European Union prescribed that people, they not only that they have a right, but they need to be engaged in this environmental impact assessment. So we need to not only to inform people and make them aware about this, but we also need to organize a consultation. Now probably needs to be organized also not only in the face-to-face, but also on digital, so that this is accessible as much as possible. But like it has been stressed already before, these are really complex issue and complex technologies. So how do we make people, how do we enable people to contribute meaningfully to these kind of decisions? So let's go to the next slide, where which represents what do we want to do in nuclear sector. So first of all, we don't want to repeat the pitfall that has been done with the big nuclear power plants, which they have been built in 60s, 70s, and they are still running. In this case, in these years, the public participation was not obliged, but now it is, because we know that it brings much better process if people are involved. So we really want to address the equity, which means that we are providing the information and tools that everybody needs to participate in the process. And we are really striving toward the justice, but not only to the justice, but also inclusion. So it means that we really that the power of the implementer, the one who is building SMR, for instance, is not measured in how many different publics they are able to, it's measured in how many different publics they are able to hear and to listen and to include, and not how many different publics or people are able to overlook or silenced even. So we are really looking for the inclusion of different stakeholders, but also different publics. So next slide will tell us how do we focus our engagement process. So we are working here on 3 types of legitimacies. So the first legitimacy is input legitimacy, which tell us who participate in this process. So do we really include everybody? Is the purpose and scope of the engagement really clear? Are we really engaging at the beginning when the decisions are not taken yet? And then we are speaking about the process legitimacy, which is how participation is conducted. Is it really fair? Is it respectful dialogue? Does give the accessible information? Does makes really enough of opportunities that everybody can contribute who wants to contribute? And does it enable people learn through this social process, and does it enable people that they can start mutually understand each other? And then also output legitimacy, what Andrei previously said really well, it's how participation influences decision, but not only the decision whether yes or no, pro and contra, and so on, but it's much more. It's also about the transparent consideration of inputs, you know, clear justification of decisions. Who did you take into account? Why didn't you take into account others? You know, and visible influence on the outcomes on the different stages. It can be also from the planning, from the research, from the putting into the environment, but also later on the commissioning. So all these legitimacies, they are somehow interrelated. And I want to stress out that strong legitimacy really requires inclusive participation, meaningful dialogue, and also outcome that really demonstrate how public input has been considered. So the next slide will tell us one about the really important components about this social learning during participation. Social learning, what does it exactly mean? So we have two components that we need to enable during the public engagement. The first is cognitive component, and we want to make people that they are able to learn about the state of the problem, you know, about the information, knowledge, and so on, but also learn about the possible solutions and their consequences, also the prediction uncertainties, learning about the others' interests, not only their own common interest, learning about also their own interest. Why do that they recognize, reflect themselves also, and the methods, tools, and strategy for communication and also agreement, the dialogue. But then is also the really important component, which in the past we quite often didn't take into account, and this is called some kind of moral development, judging what is right and wrong, acting for the good of all. So in this moral component, we really need to help our stakeholders and also public to develop a sense of self-respect and responsibility. Also taking the other perspective into account, developing skills for moral reasoning and also problem solving, and learning to cooperate. So every engagement process needs to enable people to learn also how to cooperate, we are saying that it's the conflict is not a problem. We need to somehow make a process where people can have constructive solutions about the conflict. We are not looking about the consensus, but the openness about the different views and the dialogue among the different positions. So then the next slide is telling us some kind of conclusions and recommendations. But what is really important is that the meaningful public engagement includes different, that provides a strong legitimacy also, which requires right conditions, a fair process, and outcomes that really reflect what has been heard during this. So inclusive participation, empowered public voice, enable social learning, but also, for instance, neutral and fair facilitation, which is quite important. So to conclude, the next slide, I would really like to stress that what matters the most is not whether everyone agrees with the final decision, but whether they perceive the decision-making process as fair, transparent, and meaningful. I think that well-designed participatory process really fosters social learning, mutual understanding, and also legitimacy, while poor process, if you don't have this, can deepen polarization and hinder implementation of the project itself. So we are trying to learn from our bad practices in nuclear field before many decades ago. And now when we are introducing a new advanced nuclear technology, we want to do it better. So that would be my introduction.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Very, very good explanation. Also kind of just the terminology of kind of social learning. You also underlined the complexity, of course, that undergoes with advanced nuclear technologies, what you kind of, emphasized. I was also wondering a bit, you said like, oh, there might have been, some bad practices kind of in the past with the development, of the kind of more mature nuclear power plants. To what extent do you really see we need kind of a different approach? And what might make now really this meaningful engagement? What might be kind of the critical enablers? Mm-hmm.
We have now in Europe, we have a legal requirement that we need to do it better. So I, as a citizen, I feel really well protected. So it's not anymore I'm sorry to use this word because before the project was push it, we are not allowed anymore to push it, but we need to take time to have a dialogue, to learn from each other. And there are many participatory tools that we can use. And I really hope, and as I can see in my own institute, the people that they are in power now with these small modular nuclear reactors, they are open for this kind of things. So I strongly believe that we will do it much better nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thanks so much. I'm sure there are also some questions for the participants, but before we kind of have a longer closing discussion together, let's give the floor to Jaza, who also joined us from the Swedish Energy Agency. And she will basically give us now also some perspectives on our fourth technology in the loop today, on hydrogen, with a specific focus on the developments in Sweden. So we are very happy to have you here. So hopefully,
yes,
Jaza, you can hear us.
Yeah,
Great.
Yeah, I hear you very well. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, and hi to everyone. So my contribution is going to be about the role of the public for the integration of hydrogen infrastructure into the Swedish energy system. And before I dip into details about that, I would say that very much of what I was about to say is really in agreement with what Tanya was explaining. But that's promising, of course, because since even if they are two different technologies, but there are so many similarities when it comes to infrastructure development. But let's switch to hydrogen. So when we talk about hydrogen infrastructure, we often focus on pipelines, refueling stations, electrolyzers, and large industrial projects. But the title of this event is exactly right. There is no infrastructure without people. So in Sweden, this is especially true and very important. We are currently in a phase of rapid transformation driven by industrial decarbonization in Sweden, particularly in steel, heavy transport, and lately in shipping. So hydrogen is no longer a distant solution. It's becoming a core part of the energy system. But whether hydrogen succeeds or not will depend not only on technology and economics, but on public acceptance, trust, and participation, exactly what Tanya was explaining. But let me highlight at least three key reflections from the Swedish perspective. And number one is the public is not just affected, they are really an important enabler. In Sweden, we have large hydrogen projects, whether production facilities or refueling infrastructures often require, number one, land use decisions, number two, environmental permitting, number three, local grid connections, and then we have also integration into existing communities. So this means that local municipalities, stakeholders, and citizens are directly involved. If people feel excluded, projects slow down. This we see very clearly in Sweden. And if people feel engaged, projects are accelerating. And this is also very visible. We don't have so many projects, but so far we have seen this very clearly. So public engagement is therefore not a nice thing to have, but it's a critical enabler for the deployment speed. Second aspect is understanding risk and safety. which is very essential, especially for hydrogen, since it's different kind of, and it has unique physical properties with, we know, low energy density by volume, high diffusivity, and wide flammability range, which often trigger perceived risks that are higher than actual risks, so to say. So from my experience being working, for example, on hydrogen refueling infrastructure, the biggest barrier is often not technical safety, it's risk perceptions. And misunderstandings can lead to resistance, particularly in early deployment phases. And so this means that communication must be transparent, fact-based, and continuous, not only during the project approval. So we need to explain how safety is managed, not just state that it is safe. This is very important for the public. And third and last aspect that I wanted to highlight is policy must actively include public dimension. Europe and Sweden as well are already putting in place strong frameworks like alternative fuel infrastructure regulation for transport infrastructure. But these policies often focus on targets, on deployment numbers, and technical standards. What's sometimes missing is structured public engagement requirement, exactly as what Tanya was explaining. So in Sweden, we see that successful projects are often those who engage municipalities early, co-create solutions with local stakeholders, and align infrastructure with local benefits, like with jobs, industry, transport, and so on. So this suggests that a shift is needed from deploy infrastructure to integrate infrastructure into society. So this was what does this mean going forward? If we want hydrogen to scale efficiently and sustainably, we must treat communities as partners, not as obstacles, communicate early about risks, benefits, and trade-offs, and then embed people engagement into policy framework, not as an afterthought, and then connect hydrogen projects to tangible local value. So to summarize or to come to a sort of conclusion, in Sweden, we often say that energy transition is not only about replacing fuels, it's about transforming systems. And systems, of course, include people. So if we want hydrogen to truly become a part of the energy system, we must design not only pipelines and stations, but also trust, understanding, and shared ownership. Because in the end, there is no infrastructure without people. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Jessa. A lot of good points, like from your, intervention, and a lot of parallel things that are kind of critical, right? Like taking people really on the journey, engaging them kind of continuously, but also kind of doing some honest engagement in the process. Very good, good points. There was one question in the chat. I'm not sure if anyone feels like answering this, that specifically addresses the technical complexity and the economics, considering specifically geothermal versus heat pumps for its application. Not sure, Marion, if you have any response to that. I think it's, yeah, generally, right, we have different technologies available, so maybe there might be always the question, which technology is the better one? And yeah, how do we maybe then also deal with complexities here?
Yeah, so I've put a little answer in the chat. Hopefully that's come up, but the answer basically says I can't answer that because I'm not a very technical person, but I would we focus on the engagement side, but I would obviously say that there's a sort of scale difference with the underground thermal energy storage technologies that we're looking at as part of Push It, which tend to be much bigger. But it's a really good question, and those sorts of things have been coming up in the survey as well, and just I've put in the chat a few links that might be a bit more helpful than I can be in the 1 minute that we've got and with my limited technical knowledge, but thanks.
Thanks so much, Marion. Maybe just to close, like asking all our speakers to just provide one word. What do we need more of to enable more meaningful engagement of the public in energy infrastructure projects? One word, what do we need more of to enable meaningful engagement? Andre, you want to go first?
I will use two words, vision and trust, to make sure that the vision that is there, which is decarbonization independently with what kind of technologies it's being realized, it's trusted, and then that will allow people to get engaged. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Tanya?
Yeah, I would say that what we need is to integrate social science expertise in the teams when we are deploying different technologies. We need people with social psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists. You know, we need social science expertise
social
in the
science
core
is your word?
of the.
Okay.
Yes.
One word. Okay. Sorry, Marion.
I would agree with all of that, and linked to that, we need the time and resources, of course.
Time resources. Okay, great. And Daza, what would be your one-word takeaway? What we need most?
Well, I think that we need to provide clear national guidance and standards for engagement. I think we are not having it clearly now.
That sounds great, because that's what we're going to develop and what we want to co-develop with our community. So I would go with the word co-creation, and as a kind of, maybe final word. Maybe Nevis, you want to put the final word up, and then we're kind of closing.
We see also needs, what people need, because energy is all about daily life, and it's not all about infrastructure. So listening to people's needs.
Great, needs, listening, a lot of good words. It's a nice closing, because that's also what we try to do, right? We try to listen to the community today, and that's what we want to continue doing, to actually kind of co-create hopefully a nice community of practice that brings together different aspects on how to meaningfully engage the public and energy infrastructures. And I think we can all agree that we need to have the public on board in order to build infrastructures, and I think that's also very critical, right, in order to achieve our energy and climate targets we have been setting. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks specifically to all our speakers, and let's stay please in touch. Thanks so much.
Thank you.